Welcome to day 4 of my 10-day bike trip series exploring the shores of Lake Huron and Lake Simcoe in Ontario, Canada. In this segment I'll be riding from Awenda Provincial Park along the shoreline of Georgian Bay to Craigleith Provincial Park. So today is Monday, July 23rd, 2018, and I got up around 6:30 a.m. to hang up some of my wet stuff from yesterday on the clothesline. I'm hoping to let everything dry as much as possible before packing it inside my waterproof panniers. Yesterday when I arrived at Awenda, I discovered that one of the bolts which is holding my cargo rack to my frame had become unfastened and the threads in the frame are completely stripped. I have no idea what might have caused this and I don't have the necessary supplies to repair it, so I'll need to stop at a hardware store as soon as possible. My temporary repair was to replace this bolt with a zip tie, which can hopefully get me as far as Penetanguishene. I also prepared my panniers such that most of my heavy items are loaded on the other side of the rack. By 10:30 a.m. I had everything loaded up and was ready to ride. So far the weather is looking a lot better than yesterday. The temperature is already around 24 degrees Celsius and there doesn't seem to be any rain so far. Unfortunately my smartphone, which got really wet yesterday, still isn't working properly, so I wasn't able to check the weather forecast this morning. Maybe at some point I'll be able to hear a weather report on my portable radio, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. Regardless of what the weather's doing, I still need to ride all the way to Craigleith today. So I made my way through the park roads towards the exit. I entered Awenda through the northeast entrance yesterday, so this road is new territory for me. I followed Awenda Road south down to Concession Road 16 east. My planned route for today would have had me heading west along this road to the shoreline, but since I need to make an early stop at a hardware store, instead I continued south along MacAvalley Road towards Penetanguishene. This here is called a garter snake. I definitely found it tricky figuring out which was the best road to take without the advantage of a functioning smartphone to help me navigate. My GPS has maps loaded into it, but the screen is really small and the controls are tricky to operate. When I reached Champlain Road, I turned right and joined the Waterfront Trail where I had ridden yesterday. The scenery here is certainly a lot nicer when there isn't heavy rain pouring down. Since I ended up bypassing Penetanguishene's historic downtown yesterday, I was hopeful that today I'd get to see it, but unfortunately without proper navigation I missed it again. The first stop I made in town was the Foodland grocery store where I bought a bag of rice to put my phone inside to hopefully help it dry out. Within the same plaza I stopped at Home Hardware where I bought some M5 nuts and bolts to help secure my rack. I did a repair right there in front of the store in case something went wrong and I needed to make an additional purchase. I replaced my temporary zip tie with a longer bolt which stuck all the way through and was double nutted on the outside. On the inside there's a slight protrusion from the bolt head, so I also needed to adjust the derailleur to prevent it from using the smallest sprocket to keep the chain from getting jammed. With the repaired bike I worked my way out of Penetanguishene heading west to rejoin the shoreline route that I had planned for today. I briefly rode along the continuation of the rail trail that I had been riding on yesterday, but then turned onto Overhead Bridge Road heading southwest. Having left the town of Penetanguishene, I have now re-entered the township of Tiny. I made a right turn onto Concession Road 12 and continued west. The transition was very quick from riding through thick forest to now riding through farmland. The time is now around 1:15 and with all my holdups this morning I've only traveled 27 kilometers so far, with a lot of distance left to travel to get to my destination. When I reached Tiny Beaches Road I turned left and headed south. I'll be following this same road along the shoreline all the way down to Wasaga Beach. This road is lined with cottages and summer homes on either side and is relatively quiet on this Monday afternoon. I'm now approaching the community of Balm Beach, which is one of the few communities along here which has restaurants available. I had originally imagined this would be a good spot to stop for lunch, but with so little distance under my belt so far today it's too early for me to take a break. A lot of the scenery on this road is relatively similar, but this section along here is really interesting because the ground is so sandy. Many of these cottages are built on lots which are completely sand covered, and even the properties on the left side of the road are mostly sand. Here I'm passing a couple other cyclists coming in the opposite direction, and now I'm entering the town limits of Wasaga Beach, which has a population of 21,000. Here the road changes names to River Road East, but still continues to follow the shoreline. Wasaga Beach is famous for having the world's longest freshwater beach with a total length of 14 kilometers. Despite having lived most of my life within about 100 kilometers from here, I've never visited Wasaga Beach before and I've been looking forward to seeing it for the first time. From River Road East I turned right onto Main Street and took this bridge across the Nottawasaga River. This river runs parallel to the shoreline for a long distance, making the land over here like a narrow peninsula. The beach is very nice and sandy and even on this cloudy Monday afternoon it's still quite popular. This part of the beach has a very touristy vacation-like feel to it, somewhat similar to what I experienced in Port Dover and Grand Bend on my last Ontario bike tour. The time is now past 3 p.m. and with 55 kilometers under my belt, I feel like I'm now deserving of a lunch break. I stopped at a place called Chow Burger and Shawarma and ordered a chicken shawarma wrap. The staff member there was also very helpful in refilling all of my water bottles for me. The temperature's been hovering around 26 degrees Celsius for most of the day, and prior to stopping my water supply was almost fully depleted. I'm now continuing southwest along a road called Mossley Street. The beach is still continuous in the direction that I'm riding, but it's out of sight from the road here. All of the beach is environmentally protected as part of Wasaga Beach Provincial Park. Southwest of the central hub of Wasaga Beach, the shoreline has a numbered grid of residential streets. But eventually that grid fades away and I'm now riding on a busier street called Beechwood Road. The speed limit along here is 80 kilometers per hour, but at least the road has a paved shoulder. I'm now entering the town of Collingwood, which has a population of 22,000. This road becomes a lot more busy when it merges with Highway 26 in the outskirts of Collingwood. Unfortunately, at the same point, the paved shoulder also disappears, making this section very unpleasant to ride. But eventually I found this gravel pathway which is taking me through a bit of a detour through this area. It led me to some quiet side streets and then linked back up to a trail running beside the highway. Shortly after that, Highway 26 branches off to the right, but I continued straight on a road called Hume Street, which gave me a great view of the Collingwood water tower. When I reached Huronario Street, I turned right and headed down Collingwood's main street. The town of Collingwood was first settled in the 1840s, and one of its main industries throughout the years was shipbuilding. I made a quick stop at the Loblaw's grocery store to grab a few items. For the third night in a row, I won't have the luxury of having a restaurant close to my campground tonight, so I need to buy some dinner to eat at my campsite. Since I happen to be riding right past, I also decided to stop at McDonald's to cool off with a vanilla chai tea frappe. As I was leaving Collingwood, I navigated to the start of the Georgian Trail, which will take me on a very direct route to my campground. The Georgian Trail follows the route of the former Northern Railway line. The trail surface isn't paved, but it seems to be a hard-packed crushed limestone, which makes it pretty smooth to ride on. After crossing County Road 21, I've now entered the town of the Blue Mountains, which is part of Grey County. Over on the left here I can see Blue Mountain, which is Ontario's largest ski resort. The first section of this trail was very secluded, but this part runs right along beside Highway 26. This upside down map shows that I'm getting very close to my destination. Built in 1880, this is the Craigleith railway station, which is now a museum. After riding a bit further along the trail, I turned off when I reached Arrowhead Road, which led me onto Highway 26 and towards the entrance to Craigleith Provincial Park. Of all the provincial parks I've camped at this summer, this is my least favorite. It's very small and cramped, not to mention that there's a very busy highway within close proximity of all the campsites. But the location just so happens to be perfect for the route that I'm taking. My first order of business after arriving at my campsite is to unpack absolutely everything from my panniers to let them dry. After all that rain yesterday, everything was still pretty damp when I got packed up this morning. This morning at the hardware store I bought these flat washers which I'm installing here to extend the life of these sandals. Craigleith Provincial Park is situated right on the shoreline of Georgian Bay, but there isn't a beach to swim at. The shoreline here is dominated by flat shelves of solid rock. As I walk through it, the water here feels surprisingly cold. The depth of the water is still quite shallow, even a long ways out from the shore. It's a pretty long walk to get out far enough where the water is deep enough to swim. Even on a day when it's pretty cloudy and not extremely hot, a swim in the lake is still a great way to end a day of riding. For dinner I ate some California roll sushi and a few delicious M&M cookies. As it turns out, I'm no longer in a region which has a fire ban in effect, so I could have cooked something over a campfire tonight had I known in advance. After dinner I went for a short walk and read about the sinking of the Mary Ward. In 1872, a boat traveling from Sarnia to Collingwood ran aground about 2 kilometers from shore here. So as it turns out, the shallow water I was swimming in stays relatively shallow even 2 kilometers out. Including my emergency detour back to Penetanguishene this morning, I rode my bike a total of 93 kilometers today. Stay tuned for part 5 of this video series where tomorrow I'll ride west crossing over the Niagara Escarpment and passing through Owen Sound en route to Sauble Falls Provincial Park. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching.